The rain hammered against the pavement as Solène Baptiste ran for her life, her locks whipping behind her, her lungs burning with every desperate breath. Blood trickled from her split lip, warm against her ebony skin that now felt ice-cold in the October night. Behind her, Calvin's voice roared through the storm, drunk, enraged, promising violence she'd barely escaped once already tonight. A sleek black sedan idled at the corner, hazard lights blinking. Without thinking, Sewell wrenched open the back door and threw herself inside, gasping, "Drive, please, just drive." The man in the driver's seat turned, and even through her panic, Sewell registered his sharp features, the cold calculation in his dark eyes, the way his hand moved to something beneath his jacket. This wasn't an Uber. This wasn't salvation. "Wrong car," the man in the back seat said quietly, his accented voice carrying a dangerous edge. Jae-won studied the terrified woman who'd just invaded his vehicle with an intensity that made her freeze. "But it seems you need it more than I do." As Calvin's shadow appeared in the rearview mirror, Jae-won made a decision that would change both their lives. Young-ho, drive. 3 hours earlier, Solène Sol Baptiste stood on the scaffolding 40 feet above the street, adding the final touches to her latest mural. The abandoned building's wall had transformed over the past week into an explosion of color, a phoenix rising from Detroit's industrial ruins, its wings spreading across 3 stories of brick. This was her 5th commissioned piece this year, proof that her art could actually pay bills instead of just filling notebooks. The October sun caught the metallic gold paint as she blended it into the orange and red feathers. At 24, Sewell had finally started making a name for herself in Detroit's resurgent art scene. Her skin, a deep, rich ebony that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously, glowed with a fine sheen of sweat. Her locks, gathered in a high ponytail, swayed as she worked, paint-splattered and beautiful in their controlled chaos. "Sol, you almost done up there?" Cleo Winters called from below, her neck craned to watch her best friend work. "We're supposed to meet the gallery owner at 6. 5 more minutes, Sewell called back, knowing it was a lie. Art didn't work on schedules, but the commission check for this piece would cover 2 months of rent in the tiny studio apartment she shared with Cleo, far away from the house where Calvin Pritchard still lived, far away from the man who'd made her teenage years a nightmare after he'd married her late mother. She'd escaped at 18, 6 years ago now, but Calvin still found ways to intrude. The calls, the chance encounters, the threats disguised as concern. Her mother had been gone for 8 years, and still Calvin acted like he owned her. Sewell pushed the thoughts away and focused on the wing's curve. Art was freedom. Art was control. Art was hers. Across town, Jae-won stood in his gallery, legally named Celestial Arts, unofficially the crown jewel of his less legitimate empire. The 34-year-old moved through the space with the casual authority of a man who'd commanded respect since his late 20s. His black hair was styled back from his face, revealing sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. The white dress shirt with 4 buttons undone revealed a muscular chest and the delicate Korean script tattooed vertically on the side of his neck. Yiri, loyalty. "The Vermeer arrives tomorrow night," Che Young-ho reported, standing at attention. Jae-won's second-in-command had been with him for 12 years, since they were both hungry kids in Seoul trying to survive. Ma Jin-ho's people have been sniffing around the port. Jae-won's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Ma Jin-ho, rival, former ally, current thorn in his side. The man commanded the West Side's gambling operations and had been making moves on Jae-won's art smuggling routes for months. "Double the security," Jae-won said, his accented English precise. "And, Young-ho, make sure our legitimate acquisitions are visible. I want the authorities to see we're respectable businessmen." It was the dance Jae-won had perfected, the legal gallery that showcased emerging artists, the legitimate auctions that attracted Detroit's elite, and beneath it all, the network that moved stolen masterpieces and ancient artifacts across 3 continents. He'd built this empire piece by piece, transforming his father's small-time operation into something sophisticated, something powerful. But lately, the empire felt hollow. Success without someone to share it with was just expensive loneliness. "Sir, The artist for the gallery opening next month, Young Ho ventured. Should I confirm the commission? The muralist? Jae-won pulled up the portfolio on his tablet. Solène Baptiste. Her work was raw, powerful, urban poetry translated into paint. The images showed a young black woman with rich dark skin and long locks, paint-splattered and radiant, standing before massive murals that seemed to breathe life into Detroit's forgotten spaces. Yes, offer her double what she's asking. I want her best work. He didn't know then that he'd meet her much sooner than planned. By 9 p.m., Sewell was exhausted but triumphant. The gallery owner had loved her portfolio and offered her a solo show. Cleo had insisted on celebrating with drinks, which turned into dinner, which turned into walking through downtown Detroit, talking about dreams and futures. You're going to be famous, Cleo declared, linking arms with her friend. I'm calling it now. In 5 years, your murals will be in museums. Sol laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Museums don't usually collect street art, Clee. Then they'll make an exception for you. They were still laughing when Sol's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her stomach dropped. She knew before answering some sixth sense that came from years of dread. Solène. Calvin's voice was slurred, dangerous. We need to talk. I'm at your building. She hung up immediately, hands shaking. He found the new apartment. Cleo's expression hardened. We're calling the police. And tell them what? He's my stepfather checking on me. He hasn't technically done anything yet. Sewell's voice cracked on yet. They both knew Calvin's pattern. The escalation always happened behind closed doors, where no one could witness. You're staying at my mom's tonight, Cleo decided. But when they approached Sewell's building an hour later to grab overnight clothes, Calvin was waiting. And he wasn't alone. 2 of his drinking buddies flanked him, men Sewell recognized from the bar where he spent most nights. There's my girl, Calvin drawled, pushing off the wall. He was a large man, gone to fat in middle age, but still intimidating. Been avoiding your old man? You're not my father, Sewell said, voice steadier than she felt. And I'm an adult. Leave me alone, Calvin. His expression darkened. Your mother would be ashamed of how you turned out, running around with these people, painting garbage on walls. Don't you dare talk about her. Sewell's voice cut through his rant. Her mother, gentle and kind, who died when Sewell was 16, leaving her alone with this monster. You have no right. Calvin moved faster than his bulk suggested, grabbing Sewell's arm. Cleo shouted, tried to intervene, but his friends blocked her. The world narrowed to Calvin's alcohol-reeking breath, his fingers digging bruises into her flesh. I have every right, he hissed. I raised you after she died. You owe me respect. Sewell did the only thing she could. She fought. Her knee came up hard, and when his grip loosened in shock and pain, she ran. She ran through rain that had started falling, ran through streets that blurred together, ran until her lungs screamed and her vision tunneled. She could hear Calvin behind her, roaring her name, and terror gave her speed she didn't know she possessed. The black sedan appeared like a mirage, hazard lights blinking, someone waiting. Sewell didn't think, didn't question. She just acted. The door handle was cool under her palm, the interior leather soft as she threw herself inside, gasping out a desperate plea. Drive. Please, just drive. But when the man in the back seat turned to look at her with those cold, assessing eyes, Sewell realized she'd made a terrible mistake. This wasn't safety. This might be something far more dangerous than Calvin Pritchard. Wrong car, Ahn Jae-won said softly, taking in the terrified woman with blood on her lip and terror in her eyes. And then he saw the large man approaching through the rain, saw the predatory anger in his expression, and something in Jae-won's chest tightened with recognition. He knew that kind of anger. He'd seen it in men who hurt those weaker than themselves. Behind them, Calvin's voice cut through the storm. Solène, get out of that car now. Jae-won watched Sol flinch at the voice, saw her whole body contract with fear, and he made his decision in a heartbeat. Young Ho, he said calmly, drive. As the car pulled away from the curb, leaving Calvin Pritchard shouting in the rain, Sol collapsed against the seat, shaking. She'd fled her abusive stepfather, only to end up in the car of the most feared Korean Mafia boss in Detroit. She just didn't know it yet. The car glided through rain-slicked streets while Sol tried to remember how to breathe. Her locks were plastered to her face, water dripping onto the leather seats. Blood from her split lip stained her hand where she'd pressed it to her mouth, and the man beside her, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, watched her with an intensity that should have scared her more than it did. "Thank you," Sewell finally managed, her voice hoarse. I'm sorry, I thought you were an Uber." Jaewon's lips quirked slightly. An understandable mistake. He reached into the console and produced a bottle of water and a clean handkerchief, real cloth, monogrammed. "You're bleeding." Sewell took them with trembling hands, too shaken to maintain pride. As she dabbed at her lip, she studied him in the dim light. Mid-30s, Korean, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. The tattoo on his neck caught her attention. Korean characters she couldn't read, but something about them suggested permanence, significance. "Who was that man?" Jaewon asked, his English carrying a slight accent that made each word feel deliberate. "No one," Sewell said automatically, the lie she'd told for years. "People don't run like that from no one." His dark eyes held hers. "And men don't chase like that without bad intentions." Sewell looked away, focusing on the city lights streaming past. They were heading away from her neighborhood into areas she didn't recognize. Expensive areas. "Where are we going?" "My driver is taking a longer route to ensure we're not followed," Jaewon explained. "Then I'll have him take you wherever you need to go. Unless you'd prefer I call the police." "No police," Sewell said quickly. Too quickly. She caught his shrewd look and added, "It's complicated." "It usually is." He leaned back, giving her space. "I'm Jaewon. I'm Jaewon. Solen Baptiste." She paused. "Should I know who you are?" Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or amusement. "Perhaps it's better that you don't." He studied her paint-splattered clothes, the dried paint under her nails in a dozen colors. "You're an artist." It wasn't a question, but Sol nodded anyway. "Murals. Urban art." She touched her locks self-consciously, knowing she must look wild. "I was working on a commission when Calvin found her new address, when her safe haven became compromised again, when she'd run out of places to hide in her own city. Are you safe where you live?" Jaewon asked quietly. The question was too perceptive, too knowing. Sewell met his eyes and saw no judgment there, only genuine concern from a stranger who'd helped her without question. It made something in her chest ache. "I was," she admitted, "until tonight." Jaewon was quiet for a moment, thinking. He shouldn't get involved. He had enough complications without adding a terrified artist with an abusive stepfather to his life. But something about her called to him, the fierce pride warring with fear, the creative spirit evident in every paint stain, the way she'd fought her own terror to say thank you. "I own several properties," he said carefully. "One is currently vacant, a loft in Eastern Market. If you need somewhere safe for a few days while you make arrangements." Sewell should have said no, should have recognized the danger in accepting help from a strange man, no matter how he'd assisted her. But desperation made people reckless, and the thought of going back to an apartment Calvin knew about made her stomach turn. "Why would you help me?" she asked instead. Jaewon considered the question. "Why indeed?" "Because I can," he said finally, "and because no one else did." The truth of that statement hit Sewell hard. No one had helped. Not neighbors who'd heard her shouting, not friends of her mother who'd looked away from bruises, not a system that required proof she couldn't safely gather. Only this stranger, this man with watchful eyes and expensive suits, had asked if she was safe. "Okay," Sewell whispered, "just for a few days." The loft in Eastern Market was stunning. High ceilings, exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It was furnished but impersonal, clearly not where Jaewon himself lived. Young Ho carried in bags of toiletries and basic supplies they'd stopped to purchase, his expression carefully neutral as he observed his boss's unusual generosity. "The building has security," Jaewon explained, showing Sewell how to work the intercom system. "No one gets past the front desk without being announced. You're registered as my guest." He handed her a keycard. "Take whatever time you need." Sewell stood in the middle of the beautiful space, still damp and shaken, and felt tears threaten. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Jaewon said with a slight smile. "Young Ho will bring you some clothes tomorrow." He has sisters, he's good at guessing sizes. He moved toward the door, then paused. Sul, lock the door behind me. And if that man comes here, which he won't because he doesn't know about this place, you call this number immediately. He handed her a business card. Simple, elegant. Jae-won Celestial Arts Gallery proprietor. You own a gallery? Sul asked, surprised. Among other things. His expression was unreadable. Rest tonight. Tomorrow things will look clearer. After he left, Sul did lock the door. Then she sank onto the plush couch and let herself shake apart, releasing the terror and adrenaline that had kept her moving. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. Curiosity about the man who'd saved her, and the unsettling awareness that when his hand had briefly touched hers, while giving her the key card, her skin had burned with more than gratitude. Across town, in his own penthouse, Jae-won poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey and tried to understand his own actions. He'd broken his own rules tonight. He didn't involve himself in personal dramas. He didn't offer sanctuary to strangers. And he certainly didn't feel protective of women he'd just met, no matter how her eyes had reflected the city lights or how her fear had called to something ancient in his chest. You're thinking too much, Young-ho observed, accepting his own glass. It was a good deed, nothing more. But they both knew it was more. In their world there was no such thing as simple kindness. Every action had consequences, and Jae-won had just tied himself to a woman who came with complications he didn't yet understand. Run a background check, Jae-won said quietly. Solenn Baptiste, and the man who was chasing her. Find out his name, his address, his habits. Young-ho nodded, unsurprised. And if he becomes a problem? Jae-won's expression hardened. Then we handle it. Quietly. He stood at the window looking out at the Detroit skyline and wondered what it said about him that protecting one frightened artist felt more important than the Vermeer arriving tomorrow or the territory dispute with Ma Jin-ho. Something about Sol had gotten under his skin in the span of an hour, her bravery despite terror, her pride despite desperation, the way she'd looked at him with suspicion and trust warring in her eyes. Dangerous. This was dangerous. But Jae-won had built an empire on calculated risks, and something told him Sol Baptiste might be worth the gamble. Sul woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through windows and momentary disorientation. Then memory returned. Calvin, the rain, the stranger in the expensive car. She sat up, taking in the beautiful loft in daylight, and felt surreal gratitude. Her phone had 14 missed calls from Cleo and 1 voicemail from a number she didn't recognize. She called Cleo first. Sol! Oh my God, where are you? I've been losing my mind. Calvin came back to your building looking for you, and I told him you'd gone to stay with family in Ann Arbor, but he didn't believe me, and— Breathe, Sol interrupted. I'm safe. I met someone who helped me. I'm staying in a loft he owns until I figure things out. There was a loaded pause. Hey, Sol, what happened after you ran? Sol explained about the car, about Jae-won's unexpected kindness, leaving out the part where something about him had felt both dangerous and safe simultaneously. Cleo listened with growing concern. Okay, so this random rich guy just gave you a loft out of the goodness of his heart. Cleo's skepticism was evident. Sol, that's either incredibly lucky or incredibly suspicious. I know how it sounds, Sol admitted. But Cleo, you should have seen how Calvin was. This was different. This felt like real help, not someone expecting something in return. Just be careful, Cleo pleaded. Promise me. I promise. After hanging up, Sol checked the unknown voicemail. Young-ho's voice, professional and polite, explaining he'd left clothes and groceries outside the door. When Sol opened it, she found not just clothes but art supplies, expensive ones, paints, brushes, canvas, everything she'd need to work. The note was in precise handwriting. Thought you might need to create. The north wall has good light. AJW Sol stared at the supplies with stinging eyes. He'd remembered she was an artist. In the chaos of last night, An Jae-won had remembered and cared enough to provide what she'd need to feel whole. It was such a small thing, such an enormous thing. She spent the day painting, not the mural she'd been commissioned for, but something raw and emotional. A woman running through rain. A stranger's hand extended. The moment before leap of faith. The canvas filled with bold colors against darkness, hope against fear, and Sewell poured every confused feeling into the work. She didn't know that 3 floors down, J1 had come to check on her and, seeing her silhouette against the window lost in creation, had decided not to disturb her. He stood in the lobby for 10 full minutes, just watching her paint, and felt something shift in his carefully controlled world. This woman was going to change everything. He could feel it in his bones. And the terrifying part, he was going to let her. 3 days passed in strange, suspended normalcy. Sewell painted, avoided Calvin's increasingly unhinged calls and texts, and tried not to think about her mysterious benefactor. J1 came by once a day, ostensibly to check on the loft, but really to ensure Sewell was safe. Their conversations were careful, him asking about her art, her carefully not asking about his business, both dancing around the tension that crackled between them. On the 4th night, everything changed. Sewell was cleaning brushes when the intercom buzzed. The security guard's voice came through, tense. "Ms. Baptiste, there's a man here claiming to be your stepfather, Calvin Pritchard. He's insisting on coming up." Her blood turned to ice. "How did he find—" "I'm not letting him past the desk," the guard assured her. "But he's making a scene. Should I call the police?" Sewell's mind raced. If police came and Calvin played the concerned stepfather card, if he cried and said he was just worried about his daughter, "No, just tell him I'm not here." But Calvin's voice erupted in the background, loud enough to hear through the intercom. "I know she's here, Solène. You can't hide from me forever. I raised you, you ungrateful—" The connection cut off. Sol stood frozen, heart hammering, until her phone rang. J1. "I'm 5 minutes away," he said without preamble. "Stay in the loft. Lock the door." "How did you know—" "Security alerted me." "Sol, do you have a restraining order against this man?" "No, It's complicated. He never did anything I could prove. We'll discuss that later." His voice was cold, controlled. "Right now, stay put. He won't get to you." Sewell paced the loft, listening to sirens in the distance, wondering what kind of man J1 truly was, that he could promise her safety with such absolute certainty. She found out 20 minutes later when he knocked on her door, let himself in with his own key, and she saw the barely controlled fury in his eyes. "He's gone," J1 said shortly. Building security escorted him out. "He's been informed that if he returns he'll be arrested for trespassing. He'll just find another way to—" "No." J1 stepped closer, and Sewell could see the dangerous edge beneath his polished exterior. "He won't. I've made certain of that." Something in his tone made Sewell's eyes widen. "What did you do?" "Ensured your safety." He studied her face, seeing the fear and exhaustion there. "Sewell, you can't live like this. Running, hiding, waiting for him to find you again. It has to stop." "You think I don't know that?" Sewell's voice cracked. "You think I haven't tried? But he's never done anything illegal enough to get arrested, never left marks visible enough to photograph, never made threats specific enough to warrant protection. The system doesn't help people like me until we're already dead." The bitter truth hung between them. J1's jaw tightened, and he made a decision that would blur every line he'd drawn between his world and hers. "Then we don't use the system," he said quietly. "Come with me." He took her to his penthouse, not the gallery, not an office, but his actual home. The space was stunning, all clean lines and expensive art, but what caught Sewell's attention was the wall of windows overlooking the Detroit River. In the distance, Windsor's lights twinkled across the water in Canada. Young-Ho was there, along with a woman Sewell didn't recognize. Nurse Rhonda Blackwell, J1 introduced, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an efficient manner. "Let me see that lip," Rhonda said, examining the cut that had mostly healed. "Any other injuries?" Sewell showed her the bruises on her arm, where Calvin had grabbed her. Rhonda documented everything with photographs, professional and thorough. "For the restraining order," she explained, "these photos show clear evidence of assault. But it's been days." "Doesn't matter. Bruises tell their own timeline." Rhonda's eyes were sympathetic. "Honey, I've been documenting abuse for 20 years. I know what I'm seeing, and this is enough." Sewell felt tears burn. Someone believed her. Someone saw. After Rhonda left with promises to file the paperwork, Sewell found herself alone with J1 in his living room. He poured her wine, then bourbon for himself, and they sat in silence for a moment. "Why are you helping me?" Sewell asked again. "Really?" Jaewon swirled his drink, considering. How could he explain that her fear had called to his own buried memories, that seeing her run had reminded him of his younger sister, fleeing their father's rages before Jaewon had been old enough to protect her, that something about Sewell's fierce pride and creative spirit had slipped past every wall he'd built? "Because I can," he said finally, "and because someone should have helped you long before now." Sewell studied him in the low light. "Who are you really, An Jaewon? And don't say just a gallery owner, because gallery owners don't make people disappear with a phone call." He met her eyes, and for the first time, let her see past the polished surface. "I'm someone who operates in the spaces between legal and necessary. Someone who's built an empire on understanding that sometimes the system fails people and alternative solutions are required." "You're a criminal," Sewell said, but her voice held no judgment, only recognition. "I'm a businessman with unconventional methods," Jaewon corrected with a slight smile. "But yes, Sewell, if you need simple words, I'm a criminal, the man who runs most of the art world's shadows in this city, who has connections you don't want to know about, who has done things that would horrify you." He waited for her to recoil, to run as she should. Instead, Sewell asked, "And the man who gave me a safe place to stay? Who noticed I needed art supplies? Who remembered I'm not just a victim but a creator? Is he the same criminal?" Jaewon's breath caught. "Yes." "Then maybe," Sewell said softly. "You're more complicated than either of us want to admit." The air between them thickened with tension that had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with connection. Jaewon stood, crossing to the windows, needing distance before he did something stupid like touch her. "You should stay here tonight," he said, voice rougher than intended. "The guest room is prepared. Tomorrow, we'll discuss long-term safety measures." "Jaewon." Sewell stood too, moving to join him at the window. "Thank you. For everything. For seeing me." He looked down at her, this woman with rich dark skin that seemed to glow in the city lights, with locks that framed her face like a crown, with eyes that saw too much and still chose not to look away. "You're easy to see, Sewell. That's the problem." Before he could overthink it, before logic could intervene, Jaewon reached out and tucked a stray lock behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek, and Sewell's breath hitched. The moment stretched, suspended, possibility hanging between them like a promise. Then Jaewon stepped back, professionalism slamming back into place. "The guest room is down the hall, first door on the left. There are clothes in the closet that should fit." Sewell recognized dismissal, but she also recognized retreat. She wasn't the only one feeling this dangerous pull. "Good night, Jaewon." "Good night, Sewell." Neither of them slept well, hyper-aware of the other's presence through a single wall, both questioning the wisdom of this arrangement, neither willing to change it. The next morning, Sewell found Young-ho in the kitchen making coffee. He offered her a cup with polite formality, but his eyes assessed her with the same sharp intelligence his boss possessed. "You care about him," Young-ho said. "Not a question." Sewell cradled the warm mug. "I barely know him." "You see him." "That's different than knowing." Young-ho leaned against the counter. "Jaewon-hyung has been alone for a long time, by choice mostly. He doesn't let people in." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he let you in." Young-ho's expression was unreadable. "And I'm trying to decide if that's going to destroy him or save him." Before Sewell could respond, Jaewon emerged from his bedroom, dressed for business, all traces of last night's vulnerability erased. "Young-ho, status update on the Pritchard situation. Calvin Pritchard has outstanding gambling debts," Young-ho reported. "Substantial ones. He owes money to several of Ma Jin-ho's operations." Jaewon's eyes sharpened. "Interesting. That's leverage we can use." Sewell felt cold. "What are you going to do to him?" "Nothing violent," Jaewon assured her. "Just ensure he understands that you're under my protection and that pursuing you will cost him more than he's willing to pay." He met her eyes. "Is that acceptable?" It should have horrified her, this casual discussion of manipulation and threats. Instead, Sewell felt only relief that someone was finally taking Calvin seriously. "Yes." "Good." Jaewon checked his watch. "I have a meeting at the gallery. Young-ho will stay with you." "So," he paused, "when I come back tonight, There's something I need to show you. Something you should know before you decide whether to trust me further." The words carried weight, warning. Sol nodded, already knowing she'd probably made her choice the moment she'd jumped into his car. Okay. After he left, Sol spent the day in Jae-won's penthouse, painting on the terrace while Young-ho worked on his laptop nearby. The mural that emerged was different from her usual work, two figures facing each other across a bridge, neither crossing, neither retreating, suspended in possibility. When Jae-won returned that evening, he stood for a long time studying the painting. Then he turned to her with an expression that made her heart race. "I need to tell you everything," he said, "and then you need to decide if you want any part of this world. Because, Sul, if you stay, there's no going back." Jae-won took her to the gallery after hours. The space was beautiful, even empty, filled with paintings and sculptures that represented both his legal acquisitions and his legitimate eye for talent. But he led Sul past the main floor, down a private elevator to a basement level she suspected few people knew existed. The room below was climate-controlled, secured by multiple locks, filled with art that made Sul's breath catch. A Monet she recognized from news reports of a theft years ago. Renaissance pieces that shouldn't exist outside museums. Artifacts that belonged in the cultural heritage sites of a dozen countries. "This is what I really do," Jae-won said quietly. "The gallery upstairs is legitimate. I discover artists, promote new talent, deal in legal acquisitions. But down here," he gestured to the collection, "this is where I move pieces that powerful people want to own without questions. Stolen art, smuggled antiquities, items too valuable or too illegal for normal channels." Sul walked through the space, her artist's eye recognizing the magnitude of what surrounded her. "These should be in museums, where people can see them." "You're right." Jae-won leaned against a table, watching her reaction carefully. "But the world of high art is more corrupt than most people realize. Museums have their own dark secrets, and sometimes individuals are better caretakers than institutions. It's a rationalization, I know, but it's the one I've chosen to live with. And you're telling me this because—" Sul turned to face him. "Because I want you to understand who I am. What being close to me means." He pushed off the table, moving closer. "There are people who want to take what's mine. Rivals like Ma Jin-ho who'd use anyone I care about as leverage. If you stay in my life, Sol, you become a target." "I'm already a target," Sul pointed out. "Calvin has made sure of that. This is different. This is organized crime, not personal vendetta." Jae-won stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see gold flecks in his dark eyes. "I'm offering you protection, but it comes with a price. Your freedom in some ways. Constant security, limitations on where you go, who you see, and the knowledge that the man protecting you is the same one trafficking stolen art." Sul studied his face, seeing the tension there, the expectation of rejection. "You're trying to scare me away." "I'm trying to be honest with you." "Then I'll be honest too." Sul stepped closer, erasing the last distance between them. "I know I should run. I know this is dangerous and complicated, and probably the worst decision I could make. But Jae-won, I've spent years running from danger I didn't choose. At least this time I'd be choosing the risk myself." His hands came up to frame her face, thumbs brushing her cheeks. "You don't know what you're saying." "I'm saying I see you," Sul whispered. "All of you. The criminal and the protector. The man who deals in stolen art and the one who bought me paint supplies. And I'm not running." The kiss, when it came, felt inevitable. Jae-won's mouth on hers was gentle at first, questioning, giving her every chance to retreat. But Sul pressed closer, her hands fisting in his shirt, and gentle became desperate. He kissed her like she was salvation and sin combined, like he'd been starving for this connection, like she mattered more than all the priceless art surrounding them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jae-won rested his forehead against hers. "This is a mistake." "Probably," Sul agreed. "Are you going to stop?" "No." He pulled her closer, one hand tangling in her locks. "God help me, no." But the moment of peace was shattered by Young-ho's urgent phone call. Jae-won answered on speaker, and they both heard the tension in his second's voice. "Ma Jin-ho has Calvin Pritchard. He's using him as leverage to get information about our operations." Sewell's blood went cold. What? Pritchard's gambling debts were bigger than we thought, Young Ho explained rapidly. Jin Ho grabbed him this morning. He's threatening to release him back onto Seoul unless we give up our port routes. Jae-won's expression went ice cold. Where? One of Jin Ho's warehouses on the west side. But Hyung, it's a trap. He wants you to come for Pritchard so he can eliminate you. I know. Jae-won was already moving, pulling Seoul toward the elevator. Assemble the team. Tell them defensive posture only. I don't want a war, just extraction. Jae-won, wait. Seoul grabbed his arm. You can't go after Calvin. That's exactly what this Jin Ho wants. I can't leave him there either. Jae-won's eyes met hers, conflicted. Seoul, I won't pretend to care about the man who hurt you, but if Jin Ho releases him, Calvin will come after you again, and he'll be even angrier. And if Jin Ho keeps him, he'll torture information out of him that could destroy my entire operation. Either way, we lose. Then what do? We make a trade. Jae-won's mind was working through scenarios. Jin Ho wants the port routes. I'll offer him something better, but first I need to get you somewhere safe. No. Sewell's voice was firm. If this is about me, if Calvin is bait because of me, then I'm not hiding. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. Jae-won. Sewell gripped his hand. I'm not a damsel who needs to be locked in a tower. I spent years letting Calvin control my life through fear. I'm not doing that anymore, not even for my own safety. The war in his eyes was visible. The need to protect her versus respect for her autonomy. Finally, he nodded. You stay in the car with Young Ho, behind bulletproof glass. You don't leave no matter what happens. Agreed. Agreed. The warehouse was exactly the cliché Seoul expected. Dark, industrial, surrounded by containers and suspicious vehicles. Young Ho drove them in a reinforced SUV, with 2 more vehicles flanking them as security. Through the tinted windows, Seoul could see armed men watching their arrival. This is insane, she whispered. Welcome to my world, Jae-won said grimly. He checked the gun at his back. Seoul's eyes widened, seeing it, then turned to her. Remember your promise. Stay here. He cupped her face, kissed her hard and quick, then was gone before she could process the fact that he might not come back. Young Ho remained in the driver's seat, alert and armed. Seoul watched through the window as Jae-won approached the warehouse with 2 of his men. Watched as a door opened and another man emerged. Ma Jin-ho, she assumed, older and harder looking than Jae-won, with visible scar across his jaw. The conversation was too distant to hear, but body language spoke volumes. Threats exchanged, posturing, Jae-won's controlled calm versus Jin Ho's aggressive stance. Then Jin Ho gestured, and 2 of his men dragged Calvin Pritchard out. Seoul's stepfather looked rough, beaten, terrified. Nothing like the monster who'd haunted her life. She should have felt satisfaction. Instead, she just felt tired. Jae-won's offering him the Vermeer, Young Ho murmured, seeing her confusion. The painting that arrived last week, it's worth 30 million. More than enough to buy Pritchard's release and maintain peace. He'd give up something that valuable. For Calvin? Young Ho looked at her steadily. Not for Calvin. For you. The exchange happened quickly. Jae-won made a call. Authorization given for the painting's transfer. Jin Ho's people verified remotely. Then Calvin was shoved forward, stumbling toward Jae-won's men who grabbed him. But Jin Ho wasn't done talking. Seoul saw him gesture at their SUV, saw him smile cruelly, say something that made Jae-won's whole body go rigid with fury. Then Jin Ho pulled a gun. Drive, Young Ho shouted to their driver. Now! Everything happened in slow motion. Gunfire erupted, not from Jin Ho's gun, but from the containers around them. An ambush. Young Ho pushed Seoul to the floor as bullets pinged off the reinforced vehicle. Through the chaos, she saw Jae-won dive for cover, saw his men return fire, saw the carefully controlled situation explode into violence. The SUV was moving, but Seoul couldn't see what was happening, couldn't see if Jae-won was safe. She fought against Young Ho's protective hold, terror clawing at her throat. Stop, we have to go back for him. He ordered us to get you out, Young Ho ground out, his own worry visible. Seoul, he'll kill me if anything happens to you. Trust him, he'll survive. The 5 minutes it took to reach safety felt like hours. The safe house was a nondescript building in a residential neighborhood, but inside it was reinforced like a bunker. Young Ho hustled Seol inside while making rapid calls in Korean, trying to get updates. Seol paced like a caged animal, replaying the moment Jin Ho had smiled, the moment before everything went to hell. She'd seen enough in Jae-won's posture to know Jin Ho had threatened her specifically, had probably said something crude about what he'd do if he got his hands on her, and Jae-won had been willing to walk into an obvious trap to keep her safe. "He's okay," Young Ho said finally, relief evident. "They got out. Some injuries, but nothing critical. They're heading to a different location to regroup. Then Jae-won will come here." Seol sank onto the couch, adrenaline crashing. "This is my fault. Calvin, the ambush, all of it." "No." Young Ho sat across from her. "This is Ma Jin Ho being an opportunist. Pritchard was just convenient leverage. If it wasn't him, Jin Ho would have found another excuse to come after us. But Jae-won traded something worth $30 million. He traded money for something priceless." Young Ho's expression softened. "You really don't see it yet, do you? What you are to him?" Before Seol could respond, the door opened and Jae-won strode in. His suit jacket was gone, shirt torn and bloodstained, a cut above his eyebrow bleeding sluggishly. But he was alive, and the relief that flooded Seol was almost painful in its intensity. She launched herself at him without thinking. Jae-won caught her, his arms wrapping tight, face buried in her locks. They stood like that for a long moment, just breathing, confirming life and safety and presence. "You're hurt," Seol whispered, pulling back to touch the cut on his face. "It's nothing." Jae-won caught her hand, kissed her palm. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." "Jae-won, the painting doesn't matter." His eyes were fierce on hers. "Seol, nothing matters except keeping you safe. A painting can be replaced. You can't." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was quite ready to name. Young Ho cleared his throat diplomatically and excused himself, leaving them alone in the aftermath of violence and revelation. "What did Jin Ho say to you?" Seol asked quietly. "Right before the ambush?" Jae-won's jaw tightened. "Nothing worth repeating. He threatened me. That's why you looked like you wanted to kill him. He said—" Jae-won closed his eyes briefly. "He said he understood why I'd risk so much for you, that you were beautiful, and he'd enjoy taking you from me. And then he called you something I won't repeat, and I nearly forgot every rule I have about unnecessary violence." Seol cupped his face, making him look at her. "I'm okay. You kept me safe. That's what matters." "Seol, I can't do this," Jae-won said, but his hands contradicted his words, pulling her closer. "I can't keep you safe and keep my distance. I can't protect you without caring too much, and caring too much in my world is dangerous," Seol finished. "I know, but Jae-won, maybe it's worth it anyway." He kissed her then, desperate and claiming, and Seol kissed him back with equal fervor. When they finally broke apart, both knew they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. "Stay with me," Jae-won whispered against her mouth. "Not because you need protection. Stay because you want to." "I want to," Seol breathed. "I want you." And in that safe house, with danger still lurking outside and futures uncertain, they chose each other anyway. The confrontation with Ma Jin Ho had been a declaration of war, but one Jae-won was determined to win without more bloodshed. Over the next 2 weeks he orchestrated a careful campaign, not of violence but of economics and leverage. Jin Ho's operations relied on specific connections, specific shipping routes, specific politicians turning blind eyes. Jae-won systematically dismantled each one, calling in favors, making deals, proving that he controlled more of Detroit's underground than Jin Ho had realized. The message was clear. Attacking what was Jae-won's had consequences. Calvin Pritchard, released from Jin Ho's custody battered and terrified, had been given 2 choices: accept a one-way ticket to Florida with enough money for a fresh start, or face both criminal charges for assault and the wrath of Jae-won's organization. Unsurprisingly, Calvin had taken the ticket. Seol watched him board the plane through security footage, feeling only relief that this chapter was finally closed. But the resolution with Calvin didn't solve everything. The restraining order was in place. Calvin was gone, and Seol was living in Jae-won's penthouse, their relationship evolving from protector-protected into something far more complicated and real. She painted during the days, not in secret, not in fear, but on Jaewon's expansive terrace with the city spread below her. The mural taking shape was her most ambitious yet, a portrait of Detroit itself, the ruins and renewal, darkness and light coexisting, beauty and brokenness. Jaewon would come home to find her covered in paint, glowing with creative joy, and feel something in his chest expand. They navigated the strangeness of their arrangement carefully. Separate bedrooms that became a polite fiction when Jaewon couldn't resist checking on her at night, and Seul couldn't resist inviting him to stay. Conversations that ranged from art to philosophy to the complicated ethics of his business. Meals shared, comfortable silences, the slow building of intimacy beyond physical attraction. But the threat from Ma Jin-ho still loomed, a sword suspended above their happiness. The confrontation came on a cold November night. Jin-ho requested a meeting, neutral ground, just the two leaders, to discuss terms. Jaewon knew it was likely another trap, but refusing would show weakness, and he was tired of this war putting Seul at risk. "I'm coming with you," Seul announced when he was preparing to leave. "Absolutely not. Jaewon, this started because of me. No." He gripped her shoulders, eyes intense. "Seul, you're the one thing in my life I can't risk. You don't go near Jin-ho. Ever." "Then be careful," Seul whispered, pulling him down for a kiss that tasted like fear and love intertwined. "Come back to me. Always." The meeting place was a construction site, skeletal buildings reaching toward winter sky. Young-ho and 4 others flanked Jaewon, while Jin-ho arrived with his own security. The two men met in the middle of open concrete, where ambush was impossible. "You've been busy," Jin-ho observed, "dismantling my operations piece by piece. Impressive for a man distracted by a woman." "Seul has nothing to do with business," Jaewon said coldly. "Everything has to do with everything in our world." Jin-ho lit a cigarette. "Here's what I'm proposing. I leave your territory alone. I stop coming after your organization, and in return you give me what I actually want, which is partnership." Jin-ho's smile was sharp. "Not subordination, equal partnership. We combine operations, split territories, present a unified front against the families from Chicago moving into Michigan. We'd be unstoppable." Jaewon had expected violence, threats, demands for territory. Not this. "Why would I partner with someone who just tried to kill me?" "Because I wasn't actually trying to kill you," Jin-ho admitted. "The ambush was theater, meant to scare, not execute. If I'd wanted you dead, An Jaewon, you'd be dead." He flicked ash. "I needed to know what you'd sacrifice for that woman. Turns out quite a lot. That kind of loyalty, that kind of weakness, it makes a man predictable, and prediction is valuable." Rage simmered in Jaewon's chest, but he kept his voice level. "You're wrong about one thing. Seul isn't my weakness. She's my reason to be stronger, to build something beyond endless territory wars and bloodshed." "Poetic," Jin-ho's eyes glittered. "But is it practical? This city isn't kind to romantics." "Then maybe it's time Detroit had different leadership." Jaewon met his gaze steadily. "I'll consider your proposal on one condition. You and your organization never mention Seul's name again. Never look at her, never threaten her, never use her as leverage. She's completely off limits, that's non-negotiable." Jin-ho considered, then nodded slowly. "Agreed. She's a civilian. Should have been off limits from the start. My error." He extended his hand. "Partners then? Or do you need time to think?" Jaewon didn't shake. "Not yet. I need guarantees, contracts, proof that this isn't another elaborate trap." "Of course." Jin-ho pocketed his cigarette. "You're cautious. I respect that. We'll meet again next week with lawyers, agreements, all the proper formalities." He turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. The woman, Seul. She's talented, isn't she? I've seen photos of her murals." Jaewon's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon. "Careful. Relax, I'm saying she should have a show at your gallery. If you're going to keep her, might as well make her famous." Jin-ho smiled. "Think of it as a gift. Goodwill between partners." After he left, Young-ho exhaled slowly. "That was unexpected." "He's right about the Chicago families," Jaewon admitted. "They've been encroaching for months. United, we could hold them back. Divided, they'll consume us both. Do you trust him? No, but I understand him. Jaewon looked toward the city, toward home, toward Seoul waiting for him. And right now, peace serves us better than war, at least until I can ensure Seoul is completely safe. When Jaewon returned to the penthouse, Seoul was painting by lamplight, having lost track of time in her work. She turned when she heard him enter, relief and joy flooding her face, and Jaewon felt certainty settle in his chest. This was worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth changing his entire world to keep. It's over, he said, pulling her into his arms. Jin-ho and I reached an agreement. You're safe. Seoul sagged against him. Really? Just like that? Not just like that. It took pressure, negotiation, and a willingness to partner with someone I'd rather destroy. But yes, really. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her mouth. You're safe, Seoul. Finally. She laughed, the sound caught between tears and relief, and kissed him back fiercely. I love you, she said against his lips, the words escaping before she could think better of them. Jaewon pulled back, eyes searching hers. Say that again. I love you. Seoul's smile was tremulous but certain. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. I know I love you too. The words came easier than he'd expected, natural as breathing. I've loved you since you jumped in my car and demanded I drive, since you saw what I was and didn't run, since you painted in my loft like you belonged there because you do. You belong with me, Seoul. This time when they kissed, it was different, deeper, slower, full of promise and possibility. They made love that night, not in urgency or desperation, but in the confidence of shared future, of choosing each other despite every logical reason not to. Afterward, wrapped in expensive sheets with the city glowing beyond windows, Seoul traced the tattoo on Jaewon's neck. What does it mean, your tattoo? Yuri, he murmured. Loyalty. It's a Korean concept, deeper than the English word. It means loyalty even when it costs you, loyalty to those who've proven themselves worthy, loyalty as the foundation of honor. Is that what I am to you, loyalty? No. Jaewon caught her hand, kissed it. You're love, Seoul. You're the thing I never thought I'd find in this life. But the loyalty, that's what I promise you. Absolute, unwavering loyalty. Protection. Partnership. For as long as you'll have me. Forever, Seoul whispered. I'll have you forever. And in that moment, with danger finally receding and love finally acknowledged, they both believed it. The next months were transformation. Jaewon slowly legitimized more of his operations, using the partnership with Jin-ho to streamline the illegal aspects while expanding legal ventures. The gallery flourished, and Seoul's first solo show, Detroit Reborn, was a stunning success. Her murals adorned 3 major buildings downtown, and suddenly she was the artist everyone wanted to commission. But more than professional success, they built a life together. Seoul moved officially into the penthouse, filling it with her art and laughter and paint-stained clothes. They traveled when they could. Seoul to meet Jaewon's family, New Orleans where Seoul had cousins. Careful trips that balanced his need for control with her need for freedom. It wasn't perfect. They fought about his overprotectiveness, about her tendency to take risks, about the parts of his business he couldn't fully abandon, but they fought fair and loved fiercely, and slowly the life they built felt less like temporary refuge and more like permanent home. The proposal came unexpectedly, on the anniversary of the night she'd jumped into his car. Jaewon took her to the loft where she'd first stayed, now converted into her personal studio. On the north wall, the one with good light, he'd painted a single question in careful strokes. Stay forever? Seoul turned to find him on one knee, holding a ring with a black diamond that caught light like her skin, and felt tears stream down her face. You already know my answer, she whispered. You've known since the beginning. Say it anyway, Jaewon requested, eyes bright. Yes, forever, always. Seoul pulled him up to kiss him. You saved my life that night. No, Jaewon corrected gently, echoing words they'd exchanged before. You saved mine. And really, they'd saved each other. 2 people from impossible circumstances, finding exactly what they needed in the most unexpected place, the back seat of a car in the rain, a moment of choice that changed everything. 18 months later, Solène Anne-Baptiste stood in the gallery, one hand resting on her swollen belly, watching guests admire the latest exhibition. The space had expanded, now occupying 3 buildings in downtown Detroit, and tonight's opening celebrated emerging artists from Detroit's historically black neighborhoods, a program she'd insisted J1 fund. "You're not supposed to be on your feet this much," Cleo chided, appearing at her elbow with sparkling water. Her best friend had become the gallery's community outreach director, using her sociology degree to build bridges between the art world and marginalized communities. "Baby's fine, I'm fine, stop worrying." Sewell took the water gratefully. At 7 months pregnant, she tired easily, but joy kept her energized. "Where's my husband?" "Arguing with young Ho about security for the baby's room." "Again." Cleo rolled her eyes affectionately. "They've been at it for 20 minutes. Sewell smiled, knowing Jaewon's overprotectiveness had reached absurd levels with her pregnancy, but beneath the control-freak tendencies was love so deep it sometimes stole her breath. He'd transformed his entire world to keep her safe, to build a life where their child could grow up without the violence and fear that had marked both their childhoods. The business with Ma Jin-ho had stabilized into genuine partnership. Together, they'd successfully kept Chicago families from infiltrating Michigan's territory, and slowly both organizations had shifted toward more legitimate operations. Jaewon still dealt in high-end art, but now most of it was actually legal, and the gallery had become a respected institution in Detroit's cultural renaissance. Calvin Pritchard had stayed in Florida, remarried, and by all accounts was drinking himself to death in peace. Sewell had no contact with him, and no desire for any. That chapter of her life was blessedly closed. "There you are," Jaewon appeared, pulling her gently into his arms, one hand settling protectively over their baby. At 36, he'd grown even more handsome, the sharp edges slightly softened by happiness. "You're supposed to be sitting." "The exhibit's beautiful," Sewell said instead of arguing. "These artists, you're changing lives, Jaewon." "We're changing lives," he corrected. "This was your vision." She leaned into him, feeling their baby kick strongly. They decided not to learn the gender, wanting surprise, but Sewell privately suspected a girl. A daughter who'd grow up knowing her father was complicated and powerful and would destroy anyone who threatened her, but also kind and generous and capable of infinite love. "I was thinking," Jaewon murmured into her locks, which she'd adorned with golden cuffs for tonight. "Maybe we should name the baby after your mother, or mine. Connect them to their heritage." "Celestine Hyojin," Sewell said immediately. "If it's a girl, my mother's name and yours. And if it's a boy, whatever you want." Jaewon kissed her temple. "You've given me everything I never knew I needed, Sewell. I'd give you the world in return. I don't need the world." Sewell turned to face him fully, cupping his face. "I just need this. You, me, our baby, the life we've built together. That's more than I ever dreamed possible." Around them, the gallery buzzed with life and art and culture. Outside, Detroit's lights twinkled in early darkness. And here, in the center of it all, 2 people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way stood together, choosing each other again, as they would every day for the rest of their lives. "Do you ever regret it?" Jaewon asked quietly. "Jumping in that car?" Sewell's smile was radiant. "Never. Best decision I ever made." She kissed him softly. She fled her abusive stepfather, only to end up in the car of the most feared Korean Mafia boss. Sounds like the beginning of a fairy tale, doesn't it? Fairy tales usually end happily ever after, Jaewon pointed out. "So did we." Sewell rested her forehead against his. "So did we." And as their baby kicked again, reminding them of future and hope and love continuing, they knew it was true. Their story, unconventional, complicated, born from desperation and danger, had become something beautiful. Proof that sometimes the wrong car at the wrong time turns out to be exactly right. Forever started in the back seat of that car in the rain, but forever continued here in this life they'd chosen, in this love they'd fought for, in this family they were building. And that was worth everything.